And let's go live to the Nationals' Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie. What's your thinking when it comes to Lidia Thorpe? Should there be a move to challenge her eligibility to sit in the Senate, given her antics this week?
Yeah, Kieran, when I raised this for the first time on Radio National on the ABC yesterday morning with PK, I was asking a legitimate question. This was less about a senator behaving badly. That's not news for this particular senator, but really disavowing her oath of allegiance that we all have to make before we can take up our seat in the Senate. And so in mulling that over in that 24 hours and speaking to everyday Australians who were infuriated that she couldn't be sacked, that we had to wait 4 years after such an appalling sort of display, I did raise that question yesterday, and I think it's really bit home. Right? Did she breach her vow of allegiance? Now, in peacetime, vows and oaths don't necessarily mean a lot, but in dangerous and war times, they do mean a lot. And are we seriously going to say that your word is no longer your bond in this country? So there is a serious constitutional question under Section 42 about whether she should be sitting in the Australian Senate. Now, that day that happened, she did it not only in front of His Majesty and Queen Camilla, but also the Prime Minister, the President of the Senate as well, all saw it. And so it would be highly unusual when the Senate comes back, Kieran, if the President doesn't ensure that Senator Thorpe makes an explanation to the Senate about why she chose to seemingly break that vow that she made.
Is there a risk, though, and I take the lead here from people like Tom Calma, respected Indigenous leader, who is worried that this does nothing in terms of reconciliation or improving the plight of our First Nations people. He's worried about that. If anything, it drives people away from supporting that process. Are you concerned that by focusing on Senator Thorpe, that you're actually just giving her what she wants, and that's more airtime?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the real challenges. I think it's one of the reasons that often we step away from doing the right thing because we don't want the immediate unintended consequence that somehow someone will be offended or these other goals won't be achieved. So I fully appreciate that, and particularly the concerns from Indigenous Australians. Senator Thorpe wasn't the only person in the room who's a Republican, wasn't the only person in the room who sees treaty and truth-telling as a way forward to reconciliation. But she was the only one in the room who actually trash-talked our head of state, right, as a people's representative. So I think we have to separate the two issues. This is actually an issue of whether our founding document, our constitution, works or not. And if we're going to look through a prism of, oh, well, it's an Indigenous woman, we better not treat that breach or potential breach in the same way that we treat someone else breaching it, then I think we've got real problems. This is either a founding document that's worth standing up for and protecting, or it's not. And that's, I think, the question before us.
Labor MP Andrew Charlton was on the program earlier. He says the IMF report is showing inflation is going to come down but then remain quite strong throughout next year. What it does also highlight is that Labor is on track for what's called a soft landing with low unemployment. Do we have to look at this economic data in the full sweep of things here, particularly compared to other nations that have had recessions?
Well, I think we need to absolutely understand this data. The IMF's been very, very clear. It's singled us out, along with, I think, Slovakia, as the two countries where inflation is going to stay higher for longer than it needs to be. And that hurts the poorest and the most vulnerable in our community the most. That's actually the issue here. And it's not because of international factors, as the Labor Party's been trying to tell the Australian people for 2 years. It's because their last three budgets have stoked inflation through increasing government spending. And it's not just the coalition, it's not just the RBA, an Australian economist, it's now the IMF. So this is a serious issue. And as we've heard in other commentators, the only solution potentially is going to be high unemployment, which also has significant social consequences for families. So I don't think we're in for a smooth ride at all, and I don't think the data suggests that either.
On the housing plan, you've got a $5 billion initiative you announced with Michael Sukkar on behalf of the coalition. The government is saying that it's already doing this through its housing accords with the states, and that hundreds of millions are already being spent in terms of building this stuff.
Well, that's not the case. I mean, I was out on site in the outer suburbs in Melbourne with the Liberal candidate for McEwen yesterday on site, talking to builders, developers and local councils, and whether it is state-owned utilities such as power being delayed for 2 years and therefore adding to the cost of construction, whether it's access roads to the tune of, I think, say, a road $4.2 million out in Druin would unlock a shovel-ready project of 5,000 blocks. So I think what you see with the Labor Party scheme, and I think, Jeff Chambers in The Australian unearthed this morning, you've got a politicisation of their money going on with, with state Labor governments as well. So I think the Labor Party's housing policy is much more about sandbagging than it is actually about laying slabs. Okay. Ours is about getting slabs on the ground, and you have to have water, Kieran, you have to have electricity, you have to have telecommunication and drainage and roads before you can actually get the slab laid. And that's what we're interested in doing.
We're almost out of time.
Getting the houses built.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that for many weeks to come, I'm sure. It's a key issue ahead of the next election. Before you go, though, Senator Price raised concerns around late-term abortion. Do you think it's something that needs to be addressed at a national level as well? What's your view on that issue of women's reproductive rights?
Well, this is absolutely an issue that lays squarely within the purvey of state and territory governments in this country. They are responsible for legislating, funding these types of arrangements, and that's how it stands. Now, we've all got personal views on that. Mine are, I don't choose to kind of judge people either way. Unplanned pregnancies mean tough decisions have to be made either way. I did vote, obviously, for the Baby Born Alive bill that came to the Senate a few weeks ago, because I do think it is a moral dilemma around, if we do everything we can to save some babies, and then if other babies in unplanned pregnancies that are born through a termination should at least deserve palliative care for the rest of their life here. I think that's a kind of a question of human decency. But I don't think it's helpful for us to be judging women on the tough decisions they have to make around unplanned pregnancies, and it's definitely an issue for state and territory governments, as it should be.
Senator McKenzie, thank you, as always.